few bits and bobs. The reading tonight was Matthew 7, verses 1 to 12. But if I'm honest, we're not going to get past verse 6 tonight. I could have kept on going and kept on working on things, but we might have been here for absolutely ages. So I stopped at verse 6, which I'm sure is appreciated by all. Because what we've got in this first little section here is a whole set of teaching from Jesus on how we're supposed to treat other people, how we're supposed to interact with people. And arguably, this is one of the pieces of Jesus' teaching which is the most misunderstood and the most misquoted that you will find in the entire Bible. So if you look at verse 1, just start off with that. This is the bit that tends to get misquoted to start with, and then it all just flows from there. So verse 1 says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." If you get that wrong, then it flows into what you think about specks and planks in the eyes. It flows all the way through it. If you get it wrong, you get everything wrong about what Jesus is saying in this little section. And I want to show you how this can happen. Now, if you've ever had the misfortune of looking at the comments section of a website, my goodness, that is a dark place. It's even the Christian ones as well. So what you'll find is you'll find an article gets placed online, someone makes a provocative comment or two, and it can be about anything. It can be about gay marriage, it can be about animal rights, it can be about points of doctrine, music. That gets people's juices flowing when they're making comments on church kind of websites. And in the comments, you'll get all kinds of things where people are making comments from the moderate to the extreme. There's obviously people who've been awake all night saying things like, someone's wrong on the internet, I've just got to keep posting about this. And at the end, someone will at some point play the line, I thought the Bible said, don't judge or you will be judged. And the message they're trying to convey by saying that is this one. You are disagreeing with me. And Jesus said, you're not allowed to disagree with me. You're judging me, and that's wrong. So I can ignore all of your well-made points or all of your not so well-made points, and I can use the shield of do not judge to ignore absolutely everything you've said. For many people, the command of Jesus to not judge boils down to this. No one, absolutely no one, has got the right to comment on anything I say or anything I do, because that would be judging. And in fact, Jesus is on my side. Jesus says, if you comment about anything I say or anything I do, then he's against you. You've got a great big plank in your eye. You're a big hypocrite, and so on. Jesus' teaching has very nicely been stripped of its power to essentially saying this, a great big shh. Don't ever comment on anything that anyone says or anyone does. Don't say it's wrong. Don't challenge someone's behavior. Evaluate nothing. That's what it gets reduced to a lot in people's minds. However, just a quick look at what Jesus says in the following verses should blow that right out of the water. He's not saying don't evaluate anything. He's not saying tolerate everything. He's saying something completely different. Just looking at how he refers to people in the next few verses shows this. So in verse 3, talks about certain people who are referred to as brothers. So Jesus says, if you see a speck in your brother's eye, you have to act a certain way. But down by verse 6, he's calling people pigs and dogs. He's evaluating people. He's making a judgment about who they are and what their behavior's like. And he's saying his followers should do the same thing. He's not saying don't make a comment. He's saying you should make a kind of evaluation on people. And he's not saying secretly and silently judge people. He's saying evaluate people and act accordingly based on how you evaluate them. So if he doesn't mean don't ever make a comment on how people are behaving, what does he mean when he says don't judge? What does he mean? Well, words can have a variety of meanings. The word minute can mean 60 seconds, just how we measure time. But if a husband says to his wife, I will do it in a minute, that's got a whole range of meanings that they're going to have to work out what it means. It might mean I'm going to do it in a minute, literally do it in a minute. It might mean I'm going to do it when this TV show finishes. It might mean I'll do it in a few days, just stop going on about it. Or it might mean I have no intention of ever doing it. I hope you're going to forget about it, and for you to get me to do this thing you're talking about, you're going to have to chase me with a knife. That's what the word minute can mean. Judge is one of those kind of words. It has a range of meanings, and what we have to do is discern which meaning Jesus means when he says don't judge. One of the ones I've mentioned already that we have for judge is about evaluating people. Jesus isn't saying don't do that, because actually, if you go through the rest of the New Testament, we're told to do a number of things to one another. So we're told in other parts of the New Testament to admonish and correct one another. You can't do that without making an evaluation of how someone is behaving. The book of James says, Jesus' very own brother says, whoever turns a sinner from the error of their ways will save them from death and cover over a multitude of sins. You can't turn a sinner from their wrong ways without saying, hey, you're doing something a little bit wrong and you need to change what you're doing. If Jesus is saying don't evaluate people when he says don't judge, then God is the most incoherent, contradictory speaker there has ever been. He's not. So what is Jesus doing when he's saying don't judge? Well, we've got to find which meaning he's using for the word judge. And I'm convinced it's the one I'm about to tell you. So all through the Bible, there's the thought that one day God is going to come and he's going to judge the earth, and he's going to pronounce finally and definitive judgment on people. That's what he's going to do. There's going to be a moment when he condemns evil and destroys it forever. And I think this is the range of judge that Jesus is talking about when he says, don't judge or you will be judged. He is saying, when you encounter someone, don't you dare definitively and finally pronounce judgment over them, condemning them. Don't you dare do that, because it's not your place, it's not your prerogative. You can point out their errors, you can try and turn them the way they should go, but you cannot say that they are finally and completely and forever condemned. Because if you do, just look at verses 2 and 3, you'll be judged with the same measure that you use. Jesus seems to be saying, if you go around condemning people, you'll be condemned as well. And on the one hand, he might just well be saying, if you spend your entire life looking down your nose at people and letting them know that you write them off, you'll be known as someone with a holier-than-thou attitude. You will rub people up the wrong way, and they will be itching for the moment when they can meet you back with everything you've meted out to them. They will rub their hands together with glee when they see you do something wrong. But it might also mean something else as well. It might mean other people will judge you the way you've judged them. But it might mean that if there's a person who regularly condemns other people and sets themselves up as judge, jury, and executioner, and makes really bold statements about who does belong to God and who doesn't, it could be in that moment they're revealing just how little they've understood of the gospel themselves. Which is why Jesus then goes on to talk about specks and planks in eyes. There's a song we often sing, in fact we're going to sing it tonight, which takes us through a tour of God's incredible power and his awesome nature, the song Indescribable. It's got great words in it. It really has got great words. But it also, I just went slightly Donald Trump there, didn't I? It's got all the best words. But it also has this line in it as well. You see the depths of my heart and you love me the same. God sees the depths of our hearts. Someone who has really encountered God's love and God's grace and has got a window into the depths of just how sinful they actually are, what it should do to them, it should make them think, probably, I'm at the very least just as bad as everyone around me. And probably, I'm more likely to be worse. That's what it should do. We should have that sort of thought about ourselves. That's not meant to make anyone delve into despair, by the way. It's just meant to make us think how incredible it is that God would save someone like me. That's what it's meant to do. Someone who sees the depths of their own heart like that is then going to view other people through the same eyes. They'll look at someone and say, that person is not beyond the reach of God's hand, because I am not beyond the reach of God's hand. I will not finally and forever write them off, because God's grace can reach to where they are and transform them the way he's transformed me. And I think this might be why the Apostle Paul, who established churches and did all kinds of miracles, and who wrote much of the New Testament and was prepared to be martyred for Christ, was able to say about himself, I'm the chief of sinners. I'm the world record of sin, because he knew himself. He knew what he was like. That's what it means not to judge. It's not saying don't challenge. It's not saying don't confront. It's not saying you cannot express an opinion on how someone is behaving. It's saying when you do, don't you dare climb into the judge's seat and write them off forever. It's saying that to us. And so the challenge for us might be, do we do that? Are there certain people that we look at and say, I write them off? People like that, I just write them off. God could not possibly work with them. If we do, then God's got some work to do in us, because we haven't grasped his grace properly. Maybe that's something to take home and consider. We are told that we should challenge and we should confront people, but how should we do that? That's where the next bit comes in really handy about specks and planks in eyes. This gives us a clue on how we should challenge someone if we're ever going to challenge them. So, our eyes are very, very precious to us. I think we'd all agree on that. When anything gets into our eye and it gets really lodged in there, it can cause all kinds of irritation. It can become infected. If you've got something in your eye, you just can't stop thinking about it and trying to get it out. It causes it to water, it goes red. You cannot see properly if something gets properly stuck in your eye. Sin in someone's life does exactly the same thing. It stops them being able to see things as clearly as they should do. And quite often, it's the people around them who can see that they've got the problem. So they can say, hey, there's something wrong in your life, but you can't see it yourself. Just as an example, if someone has a desire to be incredibly successful in their work life, which isn't a bad thing, and from their own perspective, they're doing it all for their family to give them everything they ever wanted, but you look at this relationship and think, there's a lonely wife there and there's children who miss their father. It's like they have a splinter in their eye, but they just can't see it. Or it could be that a person gets a brand new hobby and they love it. It's designed to make them relax when they feel stressed. So the thought of doing that thing, whether it's cycling, I know there's some cyclists here, or golf, which that never makes anyone relaxed. Whatever it is, if it's keep fit, it can be something which really gets into their heart and soul, so much so that the thought of doing it gets the old endorphins pumping, and they do it more and more and more, and they enjoy it more and more, and it takes up so much time of their life that it pushes God out. They can't see it. That's a splinter in the eye which might need removing. You might not be able to see it when you're on the 14th tee about to hit your glorious drive, or whether you're reading your 18th book of the week. You can't see it, but maybe someone else can who's looking on. When you see someone who's doing something which isn't helpful, you might have to challenge them. But how do you do it? Well, you might need to do it a little bit like this long, convoluted story I'm about to say. When I first got contact lenses, I had a regular habit. I would wear them far too long. You're not supposed to wear them all day, but from the moment I woke up, they would be in until the moment I went to bed. And because I didn't take care of them properly, which I know you're all shocked to hear about, they began to irritate. And when I was tired, I would make the fatal mistake. It would be itching, but I wouldn't have my glasses on me, so I couldn't get rid of them. It would be itching and driving me mad, and so I would rub my eye. And for a few seconds, it was bliss, absolute bliss. But on more than one occasion, when I rubbed my eye, I was able to make my contact lens move from where it's supposed to be to as far back over my eyeball as it could conceivably go. That was always a concern, And most times I was able to get it out, except for one particular time. This is when I was living on my own in a flat, and it's got close to midnight, and I can't get this contact lens out. And so I do what all men do at a moment like that. I panic, because I start to think, I'm going to lose my eye. I was picking out what pirate patch I was going to have to wear. By this stage, I've been messing about with it for so long that I've broken the contact lens, and I know there's at least 2 bits floating around the back there. So I know what I'll do. I'll go and see my sister, the nurse, at midnight, and she will help me remove my contact lens. It's that kind of scenario Jesus is talking about when he talks about splinters in eyes. If you think back to the time when he lived, if someone got a splinter in their eye, they had no mirror to go to and say, "It's there, I can get it." They had no way of seeing where it was. What they needed was someone who could see clearly and see the problem and remove it for them. And this is, what we've got here is instructions on how to correct that sin that's in someone's life. Here's what it is really. To point out the flaws or sins of another person, you need to do it with the care and concern you would use if you were removing a splinter from their eye. That night, if I visited my sister, who was overjoyed to see me at midnight, if she had said, "Chris, I can sort that for you," and had gone out into the kitchen and come back with a hammer, a saw, and a screwdriver, I would have found that a fairly unacceptable way of dealing with the contact lens in my eye. If she'd even come out with a pair of tweezers, I would have been backing away from her. What was needed was a tissue and water and incredible gentleness. That is the attitude to adopt when you're going to correct someone. I'm getting a speck out of their eye. You're not out to win an argument. You're not out to give them both barrels and make them see their point, your point. You're out to restore their spiritual sight. That's what you're supposed to do. And to help us understand that, that's why Jesus then starts talking about planks in eyes. Now, what's he doing there? Is he saying that you've got to get every single bit of your life sorted out before you can challenge anyone about anything? No, I don't think that he is. Otherwise, no one would ever challenge anyone about anything. We'd be in the realm of don't judge. Now, I think what Jesus is saying is this. When it comes to our own failings, we should be much more aware of them than we are of other people's. The things we do wrong should be like a plank in our eye to us. There was a great video clip I wanted to show to illustrate this, but I thought better of it. But I'll explain it, because I thought some people might be scared by it. So it was a female weather reporter. She was doing her thing in front of the green screen with an image of the sky and on one side and a map of America on the other side with all of the temperatures and all of that sort of thing. It was all going brilliantly until the camera, which was taking a picture of the sky, had a spider crawl across it. And so from her perspective, she could see a massive, monstrous spider coming across the screen towards her, and she screamed and fled and left the studio. It was brilliant. It's high-quality TV. I encourage you to go and watch it. Whilst she was off the screen, her co-presenters were trying to reassure her that it was only a tiny spider, but the way she looked at it, it was massive, and it was threatening, and it was dangerous. The whole thing about specks in your eyes and planks in your eyes is this. You should see your own sins like a spider on a camera. They should be that big to you, or a plank in your eye. I know far better what goes on in my mind and in my heart than I do in any of yours. I should see with a lot better clarity my own sins than I do yours. I really should do. So what should that do to me? It should humble me. It really should. What is in my heart should look huge compared to the little things that I see floating about in your eyes. And it should work the same way for you as well. It should work exactly the same way. So the response we should have when we see a speck in someone's eye and that they need help, it's not to be silent until we're completely sorted. It means we should pray things like King David did. So in Psalm 51, when he's making his big prayer after he's committed adultery, he says something like this. He says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a steadfast spirit in me." He goes to God and says, "Forgive me for all of the things that I get wrong." And then in verse 13, just a few verses on, he says this, "Then I will teach transgressors your ways, so that sinners turn back to you." Once he had done his business with God about his own sin, then he could say, "I can remove that splinter that I see in someone else's life now." So this means we're not to be cowards and say nothing. We're not to be judges and condemn. We're to be people with tissues getting specks out of each other's eyes. So that's what we're supposed to do with one another. But then, if I'm honest, we get to a point where Jesus is about to say something quite perplexing. So if you look at verse 6, he then goes on to say, "Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs." He's going to compare some people to pigs and dogs. That's not good in any culture, to compare people to pigs and dogs. But in his, it's about as bad as it gets. He's saying about some people, don't give them precious things. Don't give them what's sacred. Don't give them pearls. We don't have a lot of time to go through this, and it probably needs more explaining than we've got time for. But here are some thoughts to take away. Jesus is saying, be discriminating in how you talk to people. Some people, with respect to the gospel at a particular point in their life, might be like a pig or a dog. They might be the lowest of animals. They might be disgusting to Jews. That's what they would have been. They were scavengers that went around the streets, eating things, attacking children. That's what pigs and dogs were to Jews. And it seems like he's saying, don't give them your most precious things. The most precious thing you've got is the gospel. It seems almost like a contradiction. And then he goes on to say, otherwise they might turn on you and attack you and eat you. I think the only way to explain this, because I don't think Jesus is saying don't share the gospel with people. I don't think he's saying that, is to look at how Jesus dealt with people. He didn't have a kind of cookie-cutter approach. He didn't deal with everyone exactly the same way. So with a woman caught in adultery, he was gentle, really, really gentle. With Nicodemus, who came to see him, he challenged him. With Pilate, he engaged in a discussion about what truth is and spoke to him. With his disciples, he would teach. With the Pharisees, he would be really confrontational with them. And with Herod, he was completely and utterly silent. With one person, he was silent. He deals with people where they are. So let's put yourself into the shoes of a Jewish person, the image of a pig and a pearl. A pig is marauding through your village. It's eating all of the rubbish. It's taking a bite or two at people as they go past. It is hungry. If you give it pearls at that particular moment, what does it think? I can't eat these, but I can eat you. I can't eat these, but I can eat you. I think Jesus might be getting us to think this. People are individuals, and at certain points in their life story, some people are going to be like wild dogs and wild pigs. If you push the gospel on them at that particular moment, they will turn on you. So it might be that what you need to do is treat them as you would if a wild dog was in your garden. If you want to feed a wild dog, you domesticate it. You build a relationship with it. You build trust. It could be with some people, before you go in with all guns blazing and give them the gospel, you have to build their trust. You have to earn the right to share the gospel with them. If you push it on them too early, they might turn on you, and it's your fault because you didn't see where they were at that point in their life. It could be in time they soften. They could be like someone like Nicodemus or the priests who we later read in Acts turn to Jesus. But even if they don't, even if they stay like Herod, don't condemn them because that's not your job. It could be they're still not quite where they need to be. Jesus sees the depths of your heart. He sees the depths of my heart, and he loves us the same. Let that inform all of your relationships. Don't sit in the judge's seat, because you are no better. If you're going to challenge someone, challenge them like you're getting a splinter out of their eye. And treat people as the individuals they are. It may be you have to show people they can trust you before they're going to hear the gospel. So there's some things to take away. And I guess let's just include verse 12 as well, because this is Jesus' summary of it all, and it probably summarizes everything that I've tried to say. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. Let's pray. Father God, I want to thank you that you see the depths of our hearts. You see all of the plank-like sins that we see that no one else sees, and you love us the same. You see us when we are stubborn. You see us when we're hard-hearted. You see us when we're proud. You see us when we are just completely and utterly rebellious, and you love us the same. We want to thank you that that's who you are. We are sinful people who are saved by the death of Jesus. And so if that is who we know we are, would you help us to look at people through your eyes? We are no better than them. When we have moments when we perhaps would be tempted to judge, help us to see it's not our role. When we shy back from challenging someone about how they're behaving, help us to see actually it's not good to do that, but we've got to challenge them gently and with compassion and with care, the way we would treat them if we were dealing with a problem with their eye. Help us not to go in all guns blazing and to lay down the law. And Father, help us as well to see people for where they are at the particular time in their life. We can probably all think that there probably was a time with respect to the gospel that we all behaved like a pig or a dog. We just didn't see it for what it was. And yet you were patient with us and you slowly changed us. When we encounter someone who is hostile, help us to build trust, to build relationships, and wait for the moment when they might just be receptive to your word. Help us to do everything that this passage says, to do for others what we would have them do for us. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. We're going to close with our final song. It's the one I mentioned earlier on, Indescribable, and just